A 62-year-old woman came to my clinic with headaches that had been building for almost a year, pressure behind the eyes, fatigue that didn't lift no matter how much she slept. Her husband had started finishing her sentences because sometimes she'd lose the word she was reaching for. She laughed about it the first time. By the third visit, she didn't laugh anymore. I ran the tests. I gave her the referrals. I did everything I was supposed to do. And when she asked me, she looked right at me and asked, "Is there anything I can do at home? Anything I can eat? Anything that might actually help?" I paused. I gave her the standard answer. Low sodium, Mediterranean-style diet. Stay hydrated. She nodded. She left. She came back 8 months later, much worse. And I keep thinking, what if I had said what I now know? What if I had told her what I am about to tell you? But before I tell you what that is, I need you to understand something first. Because if I just give you a recipe, it won't mean anything. You'll try it for a few days and forget about it. What I want to give you is a reason that stays. A reason that follows you into the kitchen at 6 in the morning and makes you choose differently. So stay with me, please. Just a few more minutes. I have been a practicing physician for over 30 years. Most of that time in neurology-adjacent care, headaches, cognitive decline, post-stroke recovery. I have sat with hundreds of patients in that gray space between a diagnosis and a life. The space where medicine has done what it can, and now the person is just left with themselves and their kitchen and their choices. And what I have learned, slowly, reluctantly, because I am a stubborn man, is that the kitchen matters more than almost anything else I can prescribe. Not in a gentle wellness magazine way, in a serious way, in a "this changes the trajectory of your brain" way. The brain is the most expensive organ you own. It uses more energy than any other part of your body. It runs constantly, while you sleep, while you sit still, while you stare at nothing. And it is extraordinarily sensitive to what it is fed. Not in a week, not in a month. Day by day, meal by meal, it is either being slowly repaired or slowly worn down. Most people are wearing it down. Not because they are careless, because nobody told them. The same way nobody told that woman in my clinic. The same way, for too long, I didn't tell people either. I am done being quiet about this. There is one meal, one specific combination of ingredients, eaten in a specific way, that I have come to believe is the most powerful thing an ordinary person can do for their brain. It targets the 3 conditions I see most often destroy the quality of people's lives in their later years: dementia, strokes, and the chronic grinding headaches that often signal that something deeper is beginning. This is not a cure. I want to be honest with you. I am a doctor. I don't believe in cures you cook at home. But this is intervention. Real, meaningful intervention. The kind that changes what happens to your brain 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The kind that might mean the difference between recognizing your grandchildren's faces and not. I don't say that lightly. Let me tell you what is actually happening inside the brain when these conditions take hold. Because understanding the enemy, even briefly, changes how seriously you take the solution. Dementia is not a sudden event. People think of it that way. One day fine, one day not fine. But the process that leads to it begins quietly, sometimes 20 years before a single symptom appears. What is happening is this. The brain's ability to clear waste slows down. The connections between neurons, the pathways that carry thought, memory, recognition, begin to fray. Inflammation builds in the tissue. Blood vessels that should be flexible and responsive become stiff. The brain begins to shrink in certain regions. All of this happens slowly, silently, and it is happening in many people reading these words right now who feel completely fine. Strokes, people think of these as sudden too, and the event itself is sudden. But the conditions that allow a stroke to happen build over years. The vessels narrow, the blood thickens slightly. Small clots form and dissolve and form again, leaving tiny scars. The pressure climbs, and one day, the system that has been compensating for all of this simply can't compensate anymore. Headaches, not the occasional stress headache, but the persistent, recurring kind, are often the brain's way of announcing that something in its environment is wrong. Circulation is compromised, inflammation is elevated, the brain is thirsty or starving for specific compounds it cannot manufacture on its own. These three conditions share roots. They come from the same soil, and that means they can, to a meaningful degree, be addressed by the same intervention. That intervention is food. Specifically, it is a meal I want to walk you through now. Every component of it. Why it is in there. What it does. Not in clinical terms. I have spent enough of my career talking that way. In plain terms. Human terms. The way I wish I had spoken to that woman years ago. The foundation of this meal is salmon. I know that is not a revelation. You have heard salmon is good for the brain, but I want you to actually understand why, because understanding it makes you respect it differently. Salmon contains a specific type of fat, omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA, that is, quite literally, structural material for your brain. Your brain is approximately 60% fat. DHA is one of the primary building blocks of that fat. When you don't consume enough of it, the brain substitutes inferior materials. It uses whatever fat is available, and the result is cell membranes that are less flexible, less responsive, slower to transmit signals. Think of the difference between a fresh rubber band and one that's been sitting in a drawer for a decade. The old one still functions, but it is brittle. It breaks more easily. DHA also directly reduces neuroinflammation, the kind of inflammation that is quietly burning in the brains of people heading toward dementia. It does this by converting into compounds called resolvins and protectins. And yes, those are medical terms. I apologize. But the plain version is this. They tell your immune system to calm down, to stop attacking, to let the brain repair itself. One serving of salmon, 2 to 3 times per week, meaningfully changes this balance. Not overnight, but over months, the difference in brain tissue health is measurable. For this meal, the salmon should be wild caught if you can find it. Farmed salmon contains DHA, but in lower concentrations and with a less favorable ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. It is still worthwhile, but wild caught is the version your brain is asking for. Cook it simply. A small amount of olive oil, not too high a heat. You want the flesh to remain slightly soft at the center. Overcooked fish loses some of the fragile compounds you are cooking it for. A squeeze of lemon over the top when it comes off the heat. Salt. That is all it needs. The lemon matters more than you might think. It is not just flavor. The acidity of fresh lemon juice helps your body absorb certain compounds in the fish more efficiently. And lemon contains something called limonene and vitamin C, both of which support the health of blood vessel walls. The very walls that, when they weaken, contribute to stroke risk. Alongside the salmon, you build a base of dark leafy greens. For this meal, I use a combination: spinach and arugula, roughly equal parts, slightly wilted. Spinach contains folate. Folate is something many people know as important during pregnancy, but its importance doesn't end there. In the adult brain, folate is essential for the metabolism of an amino acid called homocysteine. When homocysteine levels rise, which happens when folate is deficient, it becomes directly toxic to brain tissue. It damages the inner lining of blood vessels. It accelerates cognitive decline. High homocysteine is one of the most consistent findings in people with early dementia and those who have experienced strokes. Spinach also contains lutein, a compound that accumulates specifically in brain tissue and appears to preserve white matter integrity. White matter is the brain's wiring. Preserve the wiring, and you preserve the speed and clarity of thought. Arugula is different. It's peppery, slightly bitter, and that bitterness is a signal. It means compounds called nitrates are present. When you eat nitrates from vegetables, your body converts them into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It relaxes blood vessels and improves circulation. More blood to the brain, more oxygen, more glucose, faster waste removal. For headache sufferers especially, poor cerebral circulation is often a core driver of pain. Arugula quietly addresses that. Wilt the greens very briefly, 30 seconds in the same pan you cooked the salmon in, just to soften them slightly and help your body access the nutrients more easily. Raw greens are fine, but lightly cooked spinach actually increases the bioavailability of certain compounds. Don't overcook. Bright green means nutrients intact. Now, eggs. I want you to add 1 soft-boiled egg to this meal. Eggs have had a complicated reputation. I understand why. But what I need you to know is that egg yolks are one of the richest dietary sources of something called choline. And choline is, I want to choose this word carefully, irreplaceable for the brain. Choline is used to produce acetylcholine, which is the primary neurotransmitter involved in memory and learning. It is the chemical your brain uses to form new memories and access old ones. In Alzheimer's disease specifically, acetylcholine systems are among the first to break down. Supporting choline intake does not stop that process, but it supports the system that process attacks. Choline is also essential for maintaining the integrity of cell membranes throughout the brain. Every neuron is wrapped in a membrane. That membrane controls what goes in and what comes out. When choline is insufficient, these membranes degrade faster. The neuron becomes vulnerable. 1 egg yolk contains roughly half the daily amount of choline that most people need. 2 eggs cover you. But for this meal, 1 soft-boiled egg is enough, because this meal gives you choline from other sources as well. Soft boil it, so the yolk is still slightly runny. A firm yolk is not a disaster, but the softer the yolk, the more of its fat-soluble compounds remain intact and available. The next element is something I am particularly attached to, because it was one of the ingredients that changed my own thinking about food as medicine. Walnuts. A small handful, 8 to 10, placed on top of the greens. The walnut is, I think, the most brain-specific nut that exists. It even looks like a brain. I used to mention this to patients as a small joke, and then I stopped joking because it's actually somewhat relevant. The walnut contains the highest concentration of DHA of any nut. It also contains ellagic acid, which has been studied for its ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and reduce oxidative stress in neural tissue. But what I want to emphasize about walnuts is something slightly different: their impact on vascular health. The compounds in walnuts, particularly a specific type of polyphenol called pedunculagon, have been shown to improve the elasticity of blood vessels and reduce LDL oxidation. Oxidized LDL is the version of cholesterol that actually damages artery walls. Non-oxidized LDL is far less concerning. Walnuts don't dramatically lower your cholesterol number, but they meaningfully reduce its danger. For stroke prevention, this matters enormously. Eat them raw. Roasted walnuts are fine for snacking, but heat degrades some of the fragile polyphenols. For this specific meal, raw is the right choice. Now, olive oil. Extra virgin. Drizzled over everything at the end. Not during cooking, after. This is important. Extra virgin olive oil contains a compound called oleocanthal. Oleocanthal behaves in the body similarly to ibuprofen. It is a natural anti-inflammatory. But its specific relevance to dementia is something that changed how I think about fat entirely. Oleocanthal has been shown in research to enhance the brain's waste clearance system. The brain has a drainage system, called the glymphatic system, that flushes toxic proteins during sleep. One of the proteins it flushes is amyloid beta, the protein that accumulates in Alzheimer's disease. Oleocanthal appears to support the enzymes that clear this protein. This is not a cure for Alzheimer's. Let me be clear about that. But supporting the brain's natural clearance mechanisms is not nothing. It is the opposite of nothing. It is one of the most meaningful things you can do. Heat destroys a significant portion of oleocanthal. This is why I add the olive oil after cooking, as a drizzle. 2 tablespoons over the finished plate. That is the dose that matters. That is not decoration. That is medicine. Choose an olive oil that is genuinely extra virgin. Many commercial oils labeled extra virgin have been adulterated with cheaper, refined oils. The real version has a slight bitterness and a peppery finish at the back of the throat. That pepper sensation is oleocanthal announcing itself. If your olive oil tastes like nothing, if it is mild and neutral, it has been compromised. Buy a single origin oil if you can. Greek, Italian, Spanish, all fine. The origin matters less than the authenticity. The final ingredient is something small, but I would not remove it from this meal even if someone argued with me. Turmeric and black pepper. Together, half a teaspoon of turmeric, a few grinds of black pepper, stirred into a very small amount of warm water and consumed alongside the meal, or mixed into the greens if you prefer. Turmeric contains curcumin. Curcumin is one of the most studied natural compounds in neurological research. Its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties are well established. But curcumin has one significant limitation. It is poorly absorbed by the body on its own. The majority of it passes through unabsorbed. This is where black pepper becomes something remarkable. Black pepper contains piperine. Piperine inhibits the enzyme that breaks down curcumin in the gut, which increases curcumin absorption by up to 20 times. This is not a small difference. It is the difference between taking a meaningful dose and taking almost nothing. I want to be honest with you again. Curcumin is not a drug. It will not reverse existing dementia. But as part of a daily pattern, alongside everything else in this meal, its cumulative contribution to reducing neuroinflammation is real. The research supports it. My 30 years of watching patients support it. My own health supports it. Take it together. Always. Turmeric without pepper is a fraction of what it could be. Now let me tell you how to think about this meal in the larger picture of your life. I am not asking you to eat this every day. 2 to 3 times a week is what I recommend. On the other days, the principles still apply. Eat foods that reduce inflammation, support blood vessel health, provide your brain with the building blocks it needs. But this specific meal, eaten this specific way, is the most concentrated version of brain support I know how to put on a plate. Timing matters somewhat. I prefer this meal at lunch rather than dinner. The brain is metabolically active throughout the afternoon, and giving it these nutrients in the middle of the day means they are available when they are most needed. The fatty acids from the salmon begin circulating within hours. The nitric oxide from the arugula peaks relatively quickly. Eating this meal in the evening is still beneficial. Please don't let perfect be the enemy of good. But if you have a choice, midday is better. Eat slowly. I know that sounds like advice from a different century, but the pace at which you eat affects how your body processes fat-soluble compounds. Rushing a meal, eating while distracted, eating in stress. All of these things alter digestion in ways that reduce absorption. This meal deserves 10 minutes of your quiet attention. That is not a large request. Drink water with it, and after. Not coffee, not juice, water. The glymphatic system, the brain's waste-clearing mechanism I mentioned, is highly dependent on hydration. Mild dehydration, the kind most people walk around with without knowing, meaningfully impairs the brain's ability to flush toxins. If you are going to support that system with olive oil, support it also with water. I want to come back to something personal, because I started there, and I think I owe it to you to come back. After the woman I told you about came back worse, after that visit that I still carry, I started talking differently to my patients. I started telling them what I knew, even when I couldn't guarantee outcomes. I stopped withholding things because they weren't perfectly proven, because the standard of proof I was holding myself to was serving my professional comfort more than it was serving the people in front of me. Medicine is not just what happens in hospitals. Medicine is what happens in kitchens, in grocery stores, in the daily 10,000 choices that determine what a brain looks like at 75. And physicians who pretend otherwise, who dismiss the kitchen as beneath their attention, are leaving the most powerful tool in their patients' hands completely unused. I began recommending this meal specifically about 6 years ago. I built it over time, adding the pepper to the turmeric when I read the absorption research, switching from farmed to wild-caught salmon with patients who had access to it, adding arugula to the spinach when I became more focused on cerebrovascular cases. The patients who commit to it, who make it 2 or 3 times a week and sustain that over 6 months, a year, 2 years, are different. I cannot quantify that for you in a clinical trial. I can only tell you what I observe. Their cognition holds more steadily. Their headache frequency drops. Their follow-up scans show less progression. Their spouses notice. Their children notice. They notice. This is not proof in the scientific sense. I want to be clear about that. But it is evidence in the human sense. And after 30 years, I trust what I observe in the people who sit across from me. The meal is not magic. Nothing about it is magic. It is just the right materials, in the right amounts, given to an organ that has been waiting for them. The brain does not ask for much. It asks for DHA to rebuild its membranes. It asks for nitric oxide to keep its vessels open. It asks for choline to maintain its chemistry. It asks for antioxidants to quiet the oxidative fire that burns slowly through neural tissue over decades. It asks for oleocanthal to help it clean itself while you sleep. This meal gives the brain those things, all at once, in a form the body recognizes and knows how to use. That is what food can do when chosen carefully, when chosen with intention rather than convenience. I think about that woman sometimes. I wonder what would have changed if I had known then what I know now, if I had been willing then to say what I am saying to you now. I can't go back. I can only go forward. And going forward, for me, means continuing to tell people the truth about what I have learned, even the parts that are inconvenient, even the parts that aren't in any guideline, even the parts that make me sound less like a doctor and more like someone who has simply been paying attention for a very long time. The brain you have right now is the only one you will ever have. It is not replaceable. It cannot be transplanted. When it goes, slowly or suddenly, it takes everything with it. Your memories, your personality, your recognition of the faces you love most. Everything you have ever thought or felt or known lives in that tissue. Feed it like it matters, because it is the most important thing you will ever be asked to care for. Make this meal this week, not someday, this week. Sit down with it, eat it slowly, and think about the fact that every bite is doing something your brain has been waiting for. That is all I ask. That is all I have ever asked.